So it's 2026, and if you're still paying rent without Bilt, it's time for a change. Bilt is the loyalty program for renters that rewards you for your biggest monthly expense, rent. With Bilt, every rent payment earns you points that can be used toward flights, hotels, Lyft rides, Amazon.com purchases, and so much more. And here's something I'm really excited about. Starting in February, Bilt members can earn points on mortgage payments for the first time. Soon, you're going to be able to get rewarded wherever you live and unlock exclusive benefits with more than 45,000 restaurants, fitness studios, pharmacies, and other neighborhood partners. Personally, I'm going to redeem my points for all of the fitness studio classes that my daughter and I love to take. SoulCycle, Barry's, Pure Barre, Core Power. It's simple. Paying rent is better with Bilt. And soon, owning a home will be better with Bilt too. Earn rewards and get something back wherever you live. Join the loyalty program for renters at joinbilt.com/KateCasey. That's JOINBILT.com/KateCasey. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. Hope that you're having a great holiday celebration post New Year's. I hope that you have had a lot of time with your friends and your family. Of course, I've tried to give you as much as possible to listen to and to watch over the holidays, and I hope you took me up on it. And I thought it would be fun for the Saturday series episode to do something a little bit different. I wanted to revisit some of the most special and compelling Saturday episodes from the last 2 years. Conversations that stayed with me long after the microphones were turned off. I did this in 2023 and didn't realize that I didn't do it last year. So I thought this might be fun to just go back. The Saturday series actually began after a conversation that I had with a colleague when I realized that I had been thinking more and more about telling parts of my own story. I ask so much of my guests. I ask them to share their origin stories, the painful moments, the heartwarming turns, the life-changing experiences that shaped who they are. And at some point I thought, maybe I should be willing to do the same. So I started by going through my own life. I shared stories I'd never said out loud before. And then I began inviting in people from my immediate circle, including my parents, to help tell those stories from their perspective. And from there, the series expanded. I started introducing you to people in my life, people you may not know, but whose stories I think are extraordinary, moving, and deeply human. And that's really the common thread of this podcast. Unscripted television is built on unscripted stories, real people, real situations. There's no polish, no performances, there's just the truth. So today's episode is a look back, a reflection on the conversations that remind me why I started the Saturday series in the first place, and why these stories matter. I'm so grateful that you're here, and I can't wait to revisit them with you, or maybe for you to just discover in general these episodes again with me. So the first thing I wanted to say is I was going to jump back to an episode that I did with Stephen Travers. Now, before I talk about Stephen, I want to go back in time. And if you remember from some of my first episodes, episode 631, which was the first Saturday series episode, I told you how I had been estranged from my father. So I was raised with my mom, and my mom married my stepfather when I was, I believe, like 3 or 4 years old. And I never grew up with my dad. I had only a handful of moments with him. My mom made it clear, he was not interested in raising you, that they had some sort of custody moment with the judge where they were talking about custody issues. And my mom told me that the judge was sort of confused and horrified when my dad said, "I only really want her," and pointed to my older sister, Megan. He was like, "But you have 2 daughters." Yeah, I only want really custody of her. So he would come and visit and pick up my sister, and I would stay home, and my mom would say, shut the curtains, I don't want you looking at them or anything. So my father would show up, and he would take my sister out, and they would go about and do things, and I never would go. So I've always had these just very small, fragmented memories of him even being around me at all. And over time, I was kind of trying to put the pieces together of like, who is this guy and what is their romantic relationship and what was the terms of their relationship? And I was always a very inquisitive child and asking my mom lots of questions. And I could see that a lot of it was very uncomfortable for her to answer. And she clearly despised him. And, when parents get divorced, like they don't really like to talk about their exes. Well, it certainly was the case with my mom. Anyway, time goes by. My sister finds my dad. I was like 32. I was just pregnant with Jack. And she said, I've tracked him down. I spoke to him and he wants us to meet up. And so I flew to Philadelphia and I meet up. And it was this bizarre experience. You can go back and listen to it in episode 631. I just was like, what the hell have you, where were you when I was growing up? And his answers were very strange. And years after, if I would ever talk to him, he was very evasive. Then I would ask about certain people that he may have been in contact with, because throughout the time that my mom was married to him, she said he would travel often to Yugoslavia and to the UK, but he was very secretive about his plans. And so as an adult, I would ask him about it. And then on one occasion, he asked me several times, are you recording me? He would acknowledge that he would know somebody and that he spent time together, but he wouldn't give me details. So I bring that up because it flashed forward to I'm at home, my husband's out of town, my kids are all asleep, and I'm looking for something to watch at night, and I'm going through Netflix, and this documentary pops up. It was called Miami Sound Murders. Now I think it's been remastered, the Miami Show Band Massacre. And I'm watching it, and I was like, this story, which I'm about to explain to you, it seems very familiar. Stephen Travers is a bassist for the Miami Show Band, and that was basically like the Beatles of Ireland. He and his bandmates had left a show on July 31st, 1975. As they went over the Northern Ireland border, they were pulled over by a group of what looked like police officers. It was the Ulster Volunteer Force, the UVF. A loyalist paramilitary group. They put a bomb in the van, and the plan was for the band to get back in the van and then to drive, a couple miles down the road, and then the van would blow up. But it preemptively exploded. And then they freaked out because they had made all of the band members get out of the van when they put the bomb in. And now they're witnesses. So then they start shooting at them. So the story of this band is in this documentary called Remastered, the Miami Show Band Massacre. 5 people were killed, including 3 members of the band, who were, again, one of Ireland's most popular cabaret bands. Again, like the Beatles, like people went crazy for them. In the documentary, Stephen, who survived, discusses what happened that night, surviving the attack, and his fight for finding out who was responsible. So I'm watching this documentary by myself. It's at night. And I'm like, why does this sound so familiar to me? So I Google my dad's name and this paramilitary group, UVF. And there I find a picture of my dad with the leader of the paramilitary group. So then it becomes this obsession about finding his connection to this group. And that's what set forth a lot of what you hear in episodes 636 and 641, I believe, which is trying to figure out where my father was the entire time that I was growing up. Because I was, again, living in suburban Philly, and then by 14, I go off to the Milton Hershey School, but I am not seeing my father at all. I have no communication. I don't know where the guy is. I meet up with him through my sister. He's got really weird communication style. He's very evasive about things. And then I'm watching this documentary and I notice that the story is familiar. Then I call my mom, and you can go and listen to that episode too. And I'm like, I just saw this documentary, and I Google my dad and this group, and I find a picture of him, and she goes, oh yeah, that's part of the reason I divorced him, was he was sending all of our savings to that group. And I'm like, wait, what? The name of the band is the Miami Sound. It was called the Miami Show Band. I'm like in my head about this. And I go to Trader Joe's in Costa Mesa, California, which is like, regular town. I have this guy ringing me up, and he's Irish. I'm one of those people where I love talking to people all the time. And I have to force myself to not, because then I'll just stay there all day. And it drives my family crazy. So he's ringing me up and I'm like, oh, and he's Irish. God, he's like, so how's your day going? And I go, oh, it's been kind of crazy. I have work and then I have a lot of kids. And he goes, oh, how many kids you have? And I go, oh, I have 5. He goes, oh, I'm one of 6. And I'm like, okay, please do not get sucked in this conversation because I know you really want to talk, but like he's ringing you up, like you don't have time for this. And I'm like trying to not get myself in these like long conversations all the time. So I'm like, okay. I said, oh, so you're from Ireland. How long have you lived here? And he says, how many years? And he goes, have you ever been? I said, no, but my family is from this area. And he goes, oh, my family's from that area too. And I'm like, oh my God, here we're going to go. How am I going to get out of this conversation, even though I really want to sit here and talk? And then I don't know what came over me. And I went, I told you I was working today. And he's like, yeah. I said, I host a podcast and I've been trying to untangle the story of my father. And I came across this documentary and it sounded familiar. And I found a picture of my dad with the leader. Do you know about the UEF? And he goes, oh yeah, they're the butcher boys. They used to slash like the throats of the Catholics. I'm like, oh my God. I go, I think he was like, I'm sure he was involved with that. He goes, oh, bad stuff. And I said, have you ever heard of the Miami Show Band? He goes, yeah, of course. And I said, well, that's what made me realize it because, I saw this picture about it. I swear to God, this guy, you guys, this happened to me. He goes, well, I know one of the band members. I'm like, what? And he takes this piece of paper out and he writes this down and he goes, yeah, this guy plays in Long Beach at the church I go to. He plays once a month. It's every 3rd Thursday. Here's the name of the church. Here is his name. Tell him I sent you. And he like passes the paper to me at the Trader Joe's. And I go, oh my God, okay. And rings me up, I leave. I start crying in the parking lot of the Trader Joe's. I was like, is this like a God moment? Like, what in the actual hell, huh? So I tried to contact the guy. It was really hard. And then because I was like frustrated, I go, I'm thinking to myself, why don't I just contact the guy from the documentary? And that was Stephen Travers. So I contact him and he's like, oh, I actually have a book coming out. This would be great. So right before we do the interview, and I have to tell you, you guys have to go and listen to this interview about what this man went through with the band. It's episode 922. I said, this story is very special to me. And I go through the whole thing with my dad. And he goes, I know all the people because he helped with the investigation of like how the government in Northern Ireland knew about this plan, et cetera. And he goes, I'll find out anything I can about your dad. And I was just like, oh my God. It was just like a series of events that happened in quick succession. And between the documentary, Stephen, and then the guy at the Trader Joe's. Now, the guy, John at Trader Joe's, I haven't seen him lately, so I don't know if he's still working there. But it was like every time I would see him, big hug. At one point, I took a picture with him. I was like, you guys have to see this guy. And lovely. He would like go home to Ireland and then he would come, like if I saw him at the Trader, he would like keep me updated about his family. Nicest guy. So anyway, that's the backstory on why I interviewed Stephen Travers in episode 922. Recently, I have been interviewing some really interesting people that have very, very unique birth stories or adoption stories. Recently, in episode 1481, I interviewed Kim, who I came across on social media. And you might see a pattern with some of them that I come across something on social media and then I track somebody down. So I immediately was struck by Kim's videos where she was talking about her father. In that episode, she talks about how her family story spans continents, generations, and a lifetime of unanswered questions because her father, born and raised in Vietnam, had actually found a biological relative through a genealogy site. And that match confirmed what had long been whispered but never proven. His father was an American soldier in the Vietnam War. So a man he never knew and about whom his own mother gave zero identifying information. So he's born in Vietnam. He doesn't know where his father is. His mother is like, don't ask questions. But the whole family is kind of whispering like, we think he was from an American soldier, which wasn't unusual at the time. So she tells the powerful origin story and the emotional impacts of uncovering a history shaped by secrecy, war, and resilience because once she finally gets a match on the genealogy site, she connects with his brother, biological half brother. And that brother had no idea the guy even existed. So that's one. And two, even though one is half Vietnamese, they look so similar. It's like, it's wild when you see the two pictures close up. And then to imagine these two 50-year-old men who didn't even know the other existed. And then the father is not interested in meeting with them right now. Like I think he's probably has a lot of shame associated with it. But hearing her tell what her father's experience has been like, and then all the family secrets in Vietnam, how the grandmother never really would share anything about her story of her child's birth story. It was just like a lot of family secrets. And I think the more that I interview people, the more I realize, despite differences in faith or culture or geography, it all kind of like is similar in a lot of families, like the secrecy and what secrets can do to families. So it was episode 1481 and her name was Kim. And I was so grateful that she shared the story and it's still unraveling. Another part to that story that's interesting is that her wedding, which is coming up, I think in 6 months or so, she is having it in Vietnam and how important cultural identity is, even though, she's lived in the United States, that it was really important to her and to her husband that she incorporates so much of her culture. I thought that was a special part of the episode too. Then another person that I came across on social media was Kelsey. And I thought her story was interesting in episode 1475 because she posted this video where she's basically showing the TV screen. And it was a documentary about a serial killer. And she said, when you find out that your childhood friend became a serial killer. So his name was Israel Keys. And her family lived basically off the grid. And so did the Keys family. And their parents had kind of a similar mindset, like conspiracy theory, end of days. And so she grew up with this kid. And then when they eventually moved away, they kept in touch with that family. And then she finds out later that he was this serial killer and probably he has since passed away. But there are many people that think there were more cases that he was connected to well after. And then I found out later that she's like related somehow to Cody Brown too. So go and listen to that. It's episode 1475, a remarkable story. The new year brings advice from every corner. Your feed, your group chat, even your barista. Everybody thinks they're a therapist. But here's the thing, advice isn't therapy. Grow Therapy connects you to licensed professionals who actually get you. Therapy is too expensive used to be the end of the conversation. But what if it didn't have to be? With Grow Therapy, care is designed to be affordable, insurance-friendly, and easy to understand. No subscriptions, just support that fits your life and your budget. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. And they connect you with thousands of independent licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. And you can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. And if something comes up, you can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session, and Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/Kate Casey today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/Kate Casey. growtherapy.com/Kate Casey. Availability and coverage can vary state by state and insurance plan. It's a new year and time to get back to feeling like yourself. If losing weight is one of your 2026 goals and you're ready to make progress you can count on, then Weight Loss by Hers might be the right fit for you. Through Hers, you're connected with a medical provider who determines if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment plan is personalized to support you in reaching your goals. Plus, you can access a range of treatment options, like oral medication kits or GLP-1 injectables. Hers goes beyond medication by offering access to ongoing care, dosage, and medication adjustments, lifestyle and nutrition tips, and 24/7 support with no hidden costs or membership fees. And with options starting at just $69 per month with a 10-month plan when paid upfront in full, Hers provides access to options that fit your goals and your budget. Feel like your best self again. Visit forhers.com/Kate Casey to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's FORHERS.com/Kate Casey. Forhers.com/Kate Casey. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded drug products are not approved or evaluated for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for full details, important safety information, and restrictions. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased. In episode 1469, I interviewed a lacrosse coach at the high school that my daughter goes to. And I did so because she came home with one of her friends and they were saying that they had a service at it's like they have a chapel, like not a chapel, but like a mass once a month. And that one of the speakers was one of the coaches, and they were crying as they were telling me about his story and his speech. And I immediately had to reach out and ask him if he would also come on the show. So when he was 35 years old, he was diagnosed with ALS, a disease that doctors told him would give him only a few years to live. And what I thought was so fascinating, a couple things, was that he had played professional lacrosse before the diagnosis and then became a coach. And that, number one, there is this predominance of ALS cases in firemen, professional athletes, and military. Why does that happen? They're trying to figure that out. And it works with a foundation that is part of a research into that. But the other thing is that he said that a lot of the symptoms that you would expect have been minimized because he's in such great shape and he's continued to try to stay in great shape. So even though he was diagnosed 2 years ago, he just played in a lacrosse game, which kind of defies what you would imagine with a diagnosis like that. I mean, he does say there are things that, like, he noticed first, I think, like his pinky, like the movement was off. But he has continued to work out for hours and hours every day, just like he did when he was a professional athlete. And that has staved off a lot of the symptoms. And the other thing that was special about that interview was his wife was pregnant with their third and went into labor, like in the middle of the interview. She called twice. And I said, I think maybe you should pick that up, just make sure she's okay. And he's like, oh, yeah, she's actually in labor. So such a class act. He was like, well, let's continue with the interview and we'll close out. Obviously, the parent of like a couple kids, he knows that it's not like they go into labor and the baby's born right away. But it was definitely a memorable interview in that case. That was episode 1469. My friend Kelly was in episode 1451, and we met on the tennis court before we had kids. And our kids were born just about a month apart. She was my first friend that I ever met that pursued surrogacy. So I thought it would be great to have her on to talk about what her experience had been like. And there's so many people that reached out and said, you know, we've been struggling to grow our family and considered surrogacy for a moment. And this really helped us a lot. And I know Kelly has received so many messages from women, from couples, from even family members that were really appreciative of the episode and for her telling her story, because it illuminated them to a different perspective. And there are so many people that said, again, like, we were on the fence about it, but this just made us feel much better. And her son is 16 years old now. So I'm sure a lot has changed in terms of like the way the surrogacy plan goes or even the laws. But I think what comes across is just this overwhelming gratitude she has for the process and for the relationship she has with her surrogate, even all these years later, and just grateful that she was able to become a mom, and her son is just such a sweetheart. So go listen to that in episode 1451. I received a message from my Substack, and I couldn't believe who the person was from. Karen Duffy, a former MTV VJ actress, best-selling author of Model Patient, My Life is an Incurable Wise Ass, She also wrote Backbone, Living with Chronic Pain Without Turning Into One, and Wise Up, Irreverent Enlightenment from a Mother Who's Been Through It. I long watched MTV as a kid and thought, this cannot be real. And she said that she listened to the show and she really enjoyed it. I was like, this is crazy. So I asked her to come on the show. And I was so grateful for the conversation. So many people reached out to me and said, I'm living with chronic pain. I'm so grateful to hear her story, how well she's doing, and to touch back on somebody who was such a big part of 90s culture too. And one of these experiences in life where I get to become friends with somebody that I really admire. And I am very grateful for that conversation and the friendship that was created from it. So you can listen to that in episode 1445. I came across a story of Danny Morin, and I interviewed her in episode 1439. She experienced every parent's worst nightmare when she lost her 15-month-old son in a tragic incident at a daycare center. And that was something that first compelled me to want to interview her. And after the interview, I was so taken with her emotional strength and her openness. She said she developed an alcohol problem after that, which one can only imagine could happen. And there were a series of really interesting life moments that came after that, and how she became a dedicated child safety advocate committed to protecting other families from similar tragedies in the wake of it. I'm always really taken by moms that become advocates in the wake of pain. And then she talks about this really deeply personal choice that she made to use a sperm donor. And then she ends up meeting this wonderful guy, and she just had twins. I think the decision to have another child after losing a child as a single mother by choice is remarkable and interesting. And I just was really fascinated to hear her perspective. And then ultimately leading her to meet her husband and expand her family. I love talking to her, and you can listen to that episode 1439. I had my friend Amber Rose Johnson on episode 1427. She's so funny. We met each other as preschool moms. And I'm not kidding you, I've been laughing ever since. And her mother was really an interesting figure in my life. And again, one of these moments where it's like, you don't know someone for very long, but they make a really big impression. Her mom and her father co-owned a gym. And the family's a riot because they co-owned a gym. And then Amber she's plus size. And she had a spa attached to the gym. And they're just like a motley crew because Amber is like a pinup for like a plus size magazine, like clear blue eyes. And she's got like the Kardashian butt. And then she's got these parents, her dad's super tall and super fit. And her mom was just itty bitty. And so she talks about, well, my mom had an eating disorder and it was openly discussed in the family. And then her mom also managed comedians and would work on these comedy shows. And it was through her mom that I started doing stand-up when Heather McDonald would ask me to open for her. And then through Amber and her mom, I started doing more stand-up. And I was taken with her mom's personality and her level of joy, even in a competitive setting, and really taught me that building up your competitors only helps you. Like cream rises to the top. And just really setting like a great tone in a business situation, I really learned from her mom. So you got to listen to that episode also because Amber's absolutely hilarious. Her personality is just so joyful, and even like the worst things, I can call her and we'll just figure a way to laugh about it. And I think you'll really love that episode if you have not already listened to it. 1427. By the way, she was the reason I got a lot of my early Bachelor guests because they would go to her salon and get like facials. And then I would like drop by and then pitch myself. Or she would just like give me their phone number or something. And then I would text them like, hey, come on my show. Brian Howie came on my episode in episode 1385. He is an award-winning director, producer, writer, and podcaster, and the author of How to Find Love in 60 Seconds. Also the creator and host of The Great Love Debate, which is been called the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast and live show series. I met him years ago through my friend Megan O'Brien, and he has recently founded a full-service podcast production company known as The Podcast People. So he's always helping people develop the podcast. So he came on because he wrote me a note and he said, I've been diagnosed with this rare form of cancer and I'm really kind of freaking out. And, if you know of anybody, and I was like, well, first of all, you got to come on the show and let's see what we can do with it. So first I put a post up in my Facebook group and said, this is the kind of cancer that Brian has. Does anybody have any connection to an expert? And I think I synced that up with the episode. Within one day, you would not believe the outpouring of leads. And Jessica, who listens to the show, she got him a connection with a fantastic team. And I'm happy to tell you that he did go to them and had surgery and he's doing great. He was actually at BravoCon because he was in Vegas for another reason. I'm bummed that he didn't get to see Jessica, but he was there with Megan because Megan, who has been on the show too, she has a company called Ring My Bell, which does like lashes and hair and beauty and all of that. Like it's kind of like an Uber for beauty. Anyway, they sent me this really great picture from BravoCon and he looks great. And he has said that literally the listeners are angels who came forward and helped him. And then recently I had somebody else ask me about helping their relative has a diagnosis. And again, you guys just like rise up. And there's so many people that reached out to her as well. So I'm very happy to tell you Brian's doing great. And I really appreciate the way that you all rallied for him. Episode 1361 was my friend Jonathan Walton. He's a successful TV producer. He's really known for doing the Queen of the Con podcast with my friend Eliza. And he had this most horrifying situation where he crossed paths with a woman claiming to be an Irish heiress fighting for this massive inheritance. They lived in the same building. And really what began as a friendship turned into a sophisticated con that cost him nearly $100,000. But rather than walk away, he fought for justice. It led to her arrest, conviction, and extradition. You don't mess with Jonathan Walton. So he put together that podcast series, which is fantastic. I highly recommend it. It's called Queen of the Con, and every season they go over a grifter, which is, is right up my alley. And I have actually been in several of the episodes. He's also written a book, and so you can go out and get that too. But listen to that episode in 1361. Actually, one part of it he goes, yeah, I can't remember if it was, I think it was offline. He was talking about how Mare, the woman that was the con, she had moved to Newport Beach, where I live, and she had been dating a guy and they were going to buy a house together and all this paperwork was almost filed. I said, by any chance, I just thought, what are the chances? I go, do you remember who the real estate agent was? And he's like, oh yeah, her name was Summer. I go, Summer Perry? He goes, yeah, Summer Perry. I go, yeah, her daughter's friends with my daughter. So I called Summer. I go, you're not going to believe this. She's just doing this podcast. Blah, blah. She goes, oh yeah, I remember the woman. And they went to look at the house. And then she sent me video from the house. Like when they were, not when they were on the tour, but like what the house looked like. So bizarre. This one I came across on social media. I had to talk to the guy. Episode 1295. His name is Steve Carter. So he was born Marks Panama Moriarty Barnes, December 21st, 1976. Reported missing at 6 months old in Hawaii. His mother, Charlotte Moriarty, took him from their home in Hawaii and left him in state custody after a false name, after being admitted to a psychiatric hospital. And then she disappeared shortly afterward. And he was placed into this orphanage. At age 4, he was adopted by Steve and Pat Carter, and he was raised in New Jersey, South Jersey. Well, in 2011, he's 35, he's living in Philadelphia, and he discovers his true identity while browsing the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. He recognized himself in age progression image as a young adult, and then a DNA test confirmed that he was indeed Marks Panama Barnes. Imagine that. Like you're just looking through a website and you're like, oh my God, that looks like me. It was like an age progression. And then he like goes through this whole process in the episode where he walks back like how he all figured it out and then what has happened ever since. I really was taken by this story. So that's episode 1295. In episode 1283, I interviewed Jim Jordan. Now, Jim is a fashion and commercial photographer. He's also like a talent scout and a manager on top of it. He takes pictures of the most beautiful women and landscapes. It's the covers of every magazine you can think of. And I love talking to him because he reminds me so much of my oldest, who's like a complete free spirit creative. But his life is absolutely bonkers. He's like raised in Malibu. At one point, he gets like essentially kidnapped and disappears for like months. And this is in the 70s where I'm like, why isn't this like on the national news? And then you realize like they probably wouldn't have covered it. And then how he comes back and then he basically runs away from home and gets to Milan. And he wants to be a photographer and then ends up becoming like this world famous photographer. He is such a nice guy, so inspiring. So many people were touched by that interview too. People were like, I'm crying in my car because he's so kind-hearted and sweet and he's so generous. He said that anytime Mia wants to come and just shadow him, which is like literally her dream job, she can do that. And that's really special because kids like Jim, well, like the way he described, his pursuit of a career is like he always kind of thought outside of the box. He wasn't necessarily made for an academic setting. And he went on to become so successful. And I think it just was like a great example about leaning into the things that you're good at and being a great communicator and being fearless. And I think we all can be guilty of that, like letting fear take over us. So I really love that episode, 1283. Sasha Williams, I came across. I had posted in my Facebook group, like, I know you guys have great stories. Like, tell me if you've got a great one. And I could not believe what she told me. So Trans World Airlines Flight 800 was a scheduled international passenger flight from JFK to Rome, Italy, with a stopover in Paris. And on July 17th, 1996, at approximately 8:31 p.m., 12 minutes after takeoff, the flight exploded and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. All 230 people on board died in the crash. And aboard that plane were Eugene Silverman, 54, his wife Etta, 53, and their daughters Candace and Jamie. Candace was 22 and Jamie was 15. Well, Candace's best friend, Sasha, was the one who responded to that and said, my best friend died in that plane crash, and I spoke with her right before she boarded the plane. And I thought, what in the world? So I just really loved that episode. It was so special. And the craziest thing is, I put the episode out. My neighbor, Kim, says, Kate, I was in a sorority with them. I'm like, what? And then my friend Carlene, she texts me and she goes, my mom just listened to your episode. My mom and dad were friends with Eugene and his wife. So the parents that were killed in the plane crash. I couldn't believe how many people were connected all to this one family that died in that plane crash. I recommend it too because there are a couple things where she said, I was like, maybe sometimes people have a premonition about their own death and we can't really explain it. So go and listen to that episode 1271. Now this one, 1247, holy shit. Allie Tally. Allie and Bobby began their Instagram account as a way of sharing their love of travel, food, and photography. And they live close to me and we have friends in common. Well, one day, Allie came across an Instagram post that looked eerily similar to the post on her feed. And it prompted a search and then the realization that somebody had totally mirrored her business and personal account posts for more than 5 years. That's a blow your hair back crazy story. So it's episode 1247 with Allie. Tracy Walder came on my show and I continue to be in awe of her. She's one of the few women to serve in both the Directorate of Operations at the CIA and as a special agent at the FBI. So she discussed working in special ops during the 9/11 era, including frequent meetings with President George W. Bush. From 2000 to 2004, she served the CIA's Counterterrorism Center's Weapons of Mass Destruction Group, followed by the FBI's Chinese Counterintelligence Team. She received many awards from her service from both the CIA and the Foreign Intelligence Offices. And then she went to work at the FBI's Los Angeles field office. And today she is an adjunct professor of criminal justice at Texas Christian University. She wrote a book called The Unexpected Spy, and she's a national security contributor for News Nation. But I first came across her by watching American Manhunt Osama bin Laden because she was one of the agents, one of the badass female agents that contributed greatly to the hunt, tracking down Osama bin Laden. What an outstanding person. I was so grateful for her time. And if you've ever been interested, like, what does it take to be a CIA officer? I'm going to tell you, she goes through everything, what they're looking for, what they need, etc. Huge respect for her. You have to follow her on Instagram. She's always giving you a perspective on international relations topics. An absolute must follow. Her name's Tracy Walder, Walder, and it's episode 1240. I love talking in episode 1205 with Laura Geller. I met Laura through my friend, QVC host Sandra Bennett, and those two are just absolute dynamos. And Laura is just like a yummy personality, warm and loving. And ever since I've done that interview, my one friend Megan is now like doing a business thing with her and immediately synced up with her. She's just a fantastic person. And when you're looking for makeup stuff, like go to her brand. She's a really good person. Father James Martin I had on episode 1199 because I had interviewed him for a 2021 documentary called Building a Bridge based on his book of the same name. And I just thought it would be interesting to talk to somebody who had a later calling to go into a faith-based position. He is an American Jesuit priest, writer, and he's editor-at-large of America Magazine and the founder of Outreach. And in 2017, Pope Francis appointed him as a consulate to the Vatican Secretariat for Communications. He's written several books, and you see him a lot when there's anything of discussion about popes. For example, before Pope Leo was named, he was all over the TV. He was the one who got all those American comedians to go to see Pope Francis shortly before he died. And I just find him to be so wise and calming, and I loved having a great conversation with him. This one I really loved too. Catherine Turman I met through interviewing the lead investigator in the Lockerbie case. And he said, you really got to interview Catherine. She served as the assistant director over the FBI's Victim Service Division from 2002 to 2020. And if you remember, FBI Director Robert Mueller, he brought her to the FBI several months after the September 11th attacks. And the mission was to establish this robust professional victim services program. So she established this terrorism and mass casualty victim service response team that became an international model. And so essentially you can think of like any disaster that happened, she was brought on. And she talks about working directly with victims' families from so many of these big moments in our history. She's arguably the Bureau's most consistently called upon contributor. She presided over the FBI's victim-centered responses in almost every case since 9/11, including the Boston Marathon bombings, multiple mass casualty shootings, international kidnappings and murders, and scores of federal crimes. She retired from federal service in June 2020, but I think the most heartbreaking part was hearing her talk about how she had put having a family basically on hold because of the job, and then also how draining it can be. And I was just so grateful for her service to this country and somebody who, you know, works in maybe in the sidelines who deserves to get as much recognition as possible. Her name is Catherine Turman, and she was in episode 1193. Maura Bragg's episode is one that I don't think I will ever forget. It's episode 1187, and I highly recommend listening to it. Maura is an attorney and an advocate for SCN2A and related disorders. I met her through a direct message, actually. She reached out to me and she's like, I think I have an interesting story, and was she right? And so she goes through her most interesting life experience after receiving the results from her 23andMe kit. And the long and short of it is she finds out her mother's one of 3 daughters in a horrific situation at home. And then she finds out her birth father her mother met in college, and then he has his own secrets. Every moment of it, your jaw will drop farther and farther to the floor. And then finding out a connection to a cousin. I don't want to spoil too much. I want you to go and listen to it. It's episode 1187. And that was one of those experiences where I was like so impressed with the guest. I'm like, I have to be friends with this person for the rest of my life. I find them to be so fascinating, but just warm and engaging and curious. All the things that you want in a friend, and she's got it. Most interesting conversation. The other one that will stay with me forever, well, actually, there were a couple of them. Jess Wall, who actually lives in the neighborhood next to me. We met about a decade ago. And my friend Carlene is the one who said, you have to interview Jess about her story. Her experience of finding out her birth father from 23andMe, it revealed it was a different biological father than she had expected. And not only that, she had 2 half-brothers, and one of them happened to be her neighbor. So that's crazy. And then I also interviewed my friend from college, Karen, and this one really stayed with me. She never expected to find out that she was 50% Ashkenazi Jewish when she completed a DNA test. Now, Karen and I went to a Catholic women's college in Washington, D.C., and Karen was raised in a Protestant home. So she gets the 50% back on her DNA test, and she's like, wait, what's going on? So when she shared the puzzling information with her mother, it set forth this discovery that her parents had actually used a sperm donor, which has also set forth a religious conversion. So she and her whole family have converted. And walking through this like big exploration process with her was so special. You know, knowing somebody in college and now reflecting back after all these life experiences and realizing that she didn't totally feel like herself in college. Something felt off to her. And then when she gets all these puzzle pieces that she can put together, that she feels more herself than ever. And also just conversations about identity, which I always find endlessly fascinating. That was a really special episode too. That's episode 880. I had a lot of people tell me that they sat in their cars and cried about that one too. And then I interviewed my old babysitter, Melody, in episode 976. And she found out this tangled relationship with her birth father. And when she got the DNA kit results, it revealed that her birth story was far more complicated. And then how she found this father that she never even knew and all of these siblings is really a special story. Now, I came across Austin Hatch's story on social media. He is a 2-time plane crash survivor, a former college athlete, and a motivational speaker on overcoming adversity, growth, mindset, teamwork, and resilience. The fact that he survived 2 plane crashes alone, unbelievable story. And you've got to listen to that one. That's episode 958. I love Chelsea Devantez. She's a great book. The book is called I Shouldn't Be Telling You This. It was one of the funniest books I've ever read. She's an Emmy-nominated writer, comedian, director. She's host of the podcast Glamorous Trash. You've seen clips of her on social media. You've listened to her on my podcast. She was the head writer for Jon Stewart's The Problem with Jon Stewart. She is an unbelievable writer. Oh, she also worked on Not Dead Yet, Girls 5, Eva. So her book, I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, is centers around her personal story, around her life experience as a child. And it is so well written, a laugh out loud, deeply moving, super personal. And I'm telling you, you got to listen to that episode 994. The last one I want to tell you about is one that still stays with me, is episode 1079. And my guest was Kim Turner. Her son, Patty Turner, died by suicide at the age of 16 in 2018. And I remember it very well because I was driving to school one morning. I saw a lot of police cars in this field on the way to school. And then I found out that a young 16-year-old boy had died by suicide, and he had left letters behind for the community. shocking, upsetting, all those things. It's years later, and I circle back to her and I asked if she would come on the show and talk about the Patrick's Purpose Foundation, which was created to honor Patrick's legacy and character through making positive changes that he had wished for. What I loved most about that interview is her explanation that the scholarships that they raise money for go to kids that don't necessarily have like what you would typically think a scholarship is deserved for, like perfect grades or something. Kids that have great character. And I remember she said, well, the last year, we gave a scholarship for like a clown school or something. Patrick's whole thing was, what about the kids that are forgotten about who don't have perfect grades? What if they're just really good people? Why don't you stop only acknowledging the kids that get that perfect grades? And that the importance of communities where, parents are very successful and they expect all their kids to be successful, that it's a tremendous amount of pressure. I thought it was a really important message. I can tell you that I think about it all the time. And one of the things that I think always will stay with me is she noted that when kids graduate from high school, they all kind of take pictures together in the sweatshirts of the college that they intend to go to. But what if a kid can't afford to go to school? What if they didn't get into the college that they wanted? What if they're really upset about it? And that in this culture in the United States, we're like pushing the 4-year degree at this like elite school. And then if you don't achieve that, like, are you less than? And Patrick's whole thing was, we have to stop doing that. So in a way of honoring him is to remember that and to award kids for having great character. So that's episode 1079. And I will never forget that interview ever, ever, ever. So those were some of the ones that really just stuck out for me over the last 2 years. I hope that you go back and listen to them. And I'll put together the list of all of these. So you go to my Substack at katecasey.substack.com so they can get a quick link to it if you didn't, have a chance to jot down what that episode number was. As always, I am so grateful for you for listening to my show all the time and all your messages and the way that you share these episodes. I am infinitely grateful for your friendships, for your thoughtful messages. I know I say it again and again and again, but it really means so much to me. I love this job. I love connecting with you. I love telling great stories, and I will always honor that and thank you again and again and again. So as always, make sure that you join the Facebook group Reality Life with Kate Casey. Make sure that you also subscribe to my What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com. The bonus episodes, I'll give you even more behind the scenes stories about some of these by going to Apple Podcasts and also Patreon, patreon.com/KatCasey. And follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KatCaseyCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, and Twitter Threads and Blue Sky at @KatCasey. Check back Monday for an all-new episode.